Dude, you are getting well. Hello, world, dude. And men, leaders, welcome everybody to the new podcast, Dude, You're Getting Well, where we talk about how leaders transform their pain into their purpose. And here with me today, I'm really excited. I got to see this human. I saw a talk he did on anger on Facebook, and someone tagged me on it, and it was really, really one of the most useful powerful things I've ever seen. So we're going to be talking about anger. We're going to be talking about men, leadership, healing, and thriving today, and maybe even some fatherhood stuff, the military, you name it. But wherever we are, remember you're part of the conversation, and please ask us anything. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to subscribe, download, share. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce, he is the Director of Behavioral Health for Emerald Medical, and he's the CEO of the Sheepdog Corporation. This is Adrian Marquez Ayala. Welcome, brother.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm excited that we got connected. I'm excited to be able to have this opportunity to talk with you and everybody watching. And just let me know what I can provide to the conversation.
I am. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm really good. I've been excited for this for a couple of days for sure. I'm like leading up into it. But I mean, it doesn't negate the work. So jumping off of a session, jumping on here, getting ready to go to another session. So it's nice to have a change. It's nice to have a shift in direction.
Well, it's so good to have you here. For those who are watching, this is not The Rock. He is a powerful individual, though, and we see the military backgrounds. I can see the all of your different achievements, all of your different all your successes, everything you've been through. When you grew up, Adrian, did you say, I want to be a therapist, or I want to be in the Marines?
Oh,
What did you want to be when you grew up?
I remember at some point in time wanting to be an astronaut, right? Which, I mean, I did get a stint of working with the DoD and NASA for a while, so that's kind of neat. But my recruiter found me when I was suspended from high school, and he had sent one of my best friend's older brother into the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. I didn't know the difference between the Marines and the Army and the Navy. I was clueless to that. He was just like, this is pre 9/11, This is 99, 2000. They're like, hey, you want to go mess some shit up? You want to go blow some stuff up?
We knew about Top Gun. We knew about the Navy, sort of.
That's really it. My knowledge of it was limited to movies. And even then, I couldn't tell you the difference between it. It wasn't even until I signed up that I was like, wait a minute, I signed up for the longest boot camp and the hardest one. Why am I doing this?
Wow.
And just found that I had a knack and a tenacity for damage. and then 9/11 happened, and that kind of changed the direction of everything. But even then, when I was with Recon, Force Recon, and then Marine Special Operations Command. And when I was running an assault team through an objective, I was never like, one day I think I want to become a mental health therapist. It never those two never crossed each other. It wasn't until I got messed up, blown up, and hurt, and I was going through Wounded Warrior Regiment, and I was working with the doctor, the medical team, but then also the behavioral health staff, and these psychologists and counselors that were smart, but they were just missing the mark. They just didn't get us. They didn't get people that made me feel that after I got to a place of mending myself as best as I could, to want to try to be the type of therapist I wish I had for others. So that's what kind of led me in that direction.
Wow. Well, we're going to get there for sure. And I definitely want to talk about this. And for our listeners, just to let that land. So we're talking to a Marine, a veteran, combat veteran, has been blown up multiple times, and a mental health therapist. But to rewind back, right? and our childhood doesn't always make it, but I'm really interested in the conversations we have and what we learn as kids, and how I see so many leaders and adults still like being driven by a 7-year-old, because so many decisions we make in our life become to try to make ourselves safe. Especially men deal with this a lot, right? And to try to protect ourselves and like add all this armor on. And I'm always just curious where we create it. I mean, as a kid, I was naturally drawn to guns and weapons and war and knights and things like that. And I'm I've heard arguments about like, oh, is it are children naturally violent? Are we inherently violent? And I was a really kind of physical. There's times in, I would say, my childhood I was violent, but what I looked back on is that I was just reflecting what was going on in my home. I was an angry child. I didn't feel safe, and I acted out in order to get attention and in order to try to like stop things, and that didn't work. And I spent a lot of my life wrestling with that. But what was your childhood like? Where did you grow up? Did you have two parents? Were they mentally well?
Yeah, I mean, that was just such a great, perfect underarm pitch for going in so many different directions. You brought up so many good things to talk about in there.
Yeah,
I'll answer your question directly.
Start with the question. Yeah, then let's talk about what comes up.
Yeah, so I had both of my parents. Yes, I mean, part of the reason why I joined the Marine Corps was the relationship that I had with my father. This has been sometimes easier talking about military stuff than it is talking about family childhood stuff. When I was younger, my dad. I noticed
I mentioned what was life like for you, little year, and you're like, well, when I joined the Army,
yeah. Look over there,
years there. Yeah.
No, so I mean, my father. I'm thankful for the last few months I had with him before he ended up passing. But when I was younger, he had a drinking problem. He was gone quite a bit. We lived in Jersey. He worked up in New York for a long time, eventually worked in Philadelphia for a while. But in the evenings, he'd be there with his, screwdriver. My sister and brother and I we joke around all the time, like
the beverage, not the tool.
Stirring the drink of orange juice and vodka, that's like the dad, But he was also, I was the oldest. So I was also the one that they were testing out how to be a parent with quite a bit.
Great.
That would often turn into aggressiveness and some violence. There's a couple of times where I'd be taken home by the police, and then, the watching the police talk to my father, listening to him, believing him. It's one of the reasons why I joined the military. I was living with my best friend from 16 on until graduation because I couldn't be in my house anymore.
Yeah. And did you feel, so your dad drank a lot. Did he act out? Was he physically or verbally abusive in any way?
Yes. More, I think I would say I can't speak for my siblings completely because I wasn't there all the time. But I could say for a fact, definitely with me, there were a couple of conversations where, it would be, he thought I rolled my eyes. And the next thing you know, I'm staring underneath the refrigerator because I had, face-to-face, therapy sessions with him. Door getting kicked in because, he bought me a phone once for my birthday. And then a few days later, he was mad that I was on the phone. So he kicks the door in and he pulls the phone out of the wall. And I'm super confused because I'm 15 years old. You just bought me this thing and now you're mad. Rules would change. Rules would change pretty quickly. There wasn't the consistency that I think we need to instill as fathers and as husbands. There was no stability in that. So what was right one day was wrong the next day, all depending on how he decided to displace his frustration with work and whatever else he was going through. And that was one of the reasons why I had to leave the house. I realized that I was creating a more tumultuous and unsteady place for my brother and my sister. And I look at my brother now. You're the oldest
of three? You have a brother and sister?
Yep, younger brother and sister. And I look at them now. I can't say how their journeys were with him individually. Everybody has their own personal stories. But, my younger brother stayed there for the longest. And, 16 years later, when I get back into a relationship with my father, he's a different guy, So I think some of that changed. Them moving from Jersey down to Florida changed, career changes. God did a great humbling experience in his life, I feel, as well too. So for my season as childhood, it was definitely a rocky one though.
Yeah, yeah. And, alcoholism really can be a family disease, even if you're not drinking and you're just part of it. It can affect everyone. And did you like take that into school? How did that affect you? Like, did that affect your performance at all as a teenager in like school or sports? I just assumed you played sports, but I don't know.
Oh yeah, I played sports, but like, what sport did you think I played?
Probably football.
Not at all. No,
maybe
not
you
allowed
were
to play
the
football.
heavyweight wrestler.
Nope.
Potentially.
This was
I could
a
see you
great.
as like a champion wrestler. What would the other one be? Track?
No, I did try the field sports though. I was as great at shot put and some discus.
Okay.
I should say great. It was better than me, but I did do shot put and discus. But no, I was kind of drug in the direction of playing soccer. So again, this is the projection and displacement, right? So my father was.
I was a soccer player too, so that's really cool. I didn't know that.
So, I mean, and I had my season. I wasn't always, 235, 240 pounds. That's a little light. But I was never very swift. I was always a larger guy, But my dad, he played soccer for Princeton back in the 70s, right? So I was,
Oh, wow.
And that was one of the big complexes of it. So my dad got to go to Princeton, and he always had that as a chip on his shoulder that he would you'll never make it to Princeton. You'll never make it to Princeton. It wasn't until when I was older that I found his old report cards and I saw what his grades were, and putting two and two together, talking to mom and grandma, and like, this is the season of like affirmative action. Princeton needs a soccer player. Here's this Puerto Rican soccer player guy. Like, let's bring him into school, and that's what brought him to Princeton. But
both
still,
your parents
that was like
Puerto Rican.
Yes. Yep. I'm 100% Puerto Rican, third generation.
Third generation.
My grandparents are from the island. Yep.
Did anybody live in New York?
Yeah. My mother was born in Brooklyn.
Oh, right on. All right, cool.
Yep. Rutledge Street, her and her 12 siblings. So.
Yeah. I got to study a lot of I got a lot of Puerto Rican friends living in New York 20 years. I've got to know the culture there really well. It's really amazing how it's been born in New York. But, I'm just curious about, because that can affect how we grew up, and like, especially if you grew up in, where was it?
Jersey.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea what that's like. I grew up in the South, so, it's like, I'm sure you had other Puerto Rican friends. I didn't know a single Puerto Rican in Tennessee.
I did when I was very little, but when I was about elementary school, sometime around then, my dad moved to this little town called Medford, New Jersey. And in Medford, New Jersey, like, the minority ratio was like me and an Asian girl. Like, that was it. It was a very, very white town. I remember in kindergarten, like, it was first grade, second, somewhere around there. But like at gym class, you'd have to walk across the hallway to get a sip of water, hold the hand of the next kid, and walk back. And there was this one kid, I can't remember his last name, so I'll protect him with that way. It's Tony something, but like, he walks, like, I sip my water, I turn around and I'm waiting for him, and he goes, excuse my language, because I'm not going to drink out of the water fountain some nigger drank out of. And I remember going, oh, there's a black kid in our school now? Like, looking up and down the hallway, and then going, oh, you mean me? I'm Puerto Rican. He's like, that's what I said, nigger. I'm like, that's it was a shock. It was a huge culture shock to me. That's when I realized in Medford I did not fit in. And it was, all the way up through high school. In high schools, there's some other guys showed up, other minorities that were in the class as well, but there's still just a small little cluster of us. And that
was high school for you.
Yeah, and everybody wanted the 90s, right? So everybody wanted their token brown-skinned friend, right? Like, that was the cool thing to have. Whenever anybody was looking for pot, like, I'm the person they came to, even before I ever tried it. Like, I had some kind of connection all the time just because I'm a minority. But I also remember, like, dating girls, and like, they would love, they were happy we were dating, but their parents couldn't know that we were dating. Or like, we'd go to a friend's house and the parents would be like, y'all kids have a great time, run around, go play, except for Adrian, you stay here. Like, I'm the one that can't be trusted to go out there, because it's just still this strange world of the 90s, and like, this blending pot. Now I heard Medford's a lot more mixed, a lot more blended. But yeah, that was high school life.
Yeah, and I mean, we're still dealing with this today. I mean, it's that's just like friends I was growing up trying to like defend. It's because my dad worked in civil rights, and thank God he sprinkled some like something in me, because I wouldn't have had a shot growing up in the South. But we've got a really large African American population in Chattanooga. That's amazing. Really strong culture there. That's really cool. In Tennessee, but it's good to know. So, I mean, were you popular in high school?
Man, I don't. That's super subjective. I mean,
Yeah, this is one of my favorite questions. My wife
yeah,
thinks she wasn't at
weird.
all, and she turns out to be like the most popular. And she was like, "I thought I was a nerd." Her friends like, "Are you kidding me? You ran the school." But I'm
Yeah,
curious for
I did not
Adrian
think
what
I
it was like for
was.
you.
Yeah, I really did not think that I was. I, I've learned that more people knew who I was than I thought. But again, it might have been because I was like one of the three non-white kids in school, so
Mm,
like stuck out a little bit. I always had I recognize that I've always thought myself as like the out of place chubby brown kid, and that's one of those things that uniquely still sticks along till
mm.
now. My wife will tease me sometimes when I'm like am I getting fat now? And she's like, you are ridiculous. Like like I still I see myself differently than I'll look at a picture and I won't even recognize who I'm looking at for a second, and then I realize that it's me
Mm.
because I didn't remember looking like that when I was that age. And then after looking at it for a minute, then I don't see what I saw at first glance. My mind will do that thing where it warps the image into thinking that you're that chubby brown kid again. So I
Yeah,
feel like I always had an issue with trying to fit in, and it wasn't until several years into the military when I started to figure out the difference between my ideal self and my real self started to finally have some better congruency.
yeah, and I can imagine growing up in that situation. That I mean, what was the like the feelings associated with feeling like left out or ostracized because of the color of your skin, or uh, your father being an alcoholic? Like, what did that leave you? Like, what's the feeling you're left with as a teenager?
Very alone. I mean, and it's one that carries over. I mean, some of the
Mm,
some of the cognitions or the cognitive beliefs that we establish when we're younger definitely carry over. I mean,
yeah,
phenomenological experience, right? Like what I've been through and how I perceive or experience thing at a certain stage in life. I might have had to absorb those beliefs or like conform to that identity then
yeah,
because I needed to survive. Now, 20 years later, I'm still holding on to those beliefs and those ideals and those thought structures. They don't serve me well anymore, but that's just who I've been. And I've never gone through the process of like individualization of like a reabsorption of those personality characteristics. Like they've lasted for so long. I think that my father was very concerned with being he was a very dark Puerto Rican. My mom's very light skinned Puerto Rican, so like right there in the middle. Like of being who he was in the town that he was and how he was seen. We can't speak Spanish in the house. Trying to conform and not stick out, and everything that we did. It's like you also have to remember that we're the spokespeople for minorities in this town, but at the same time don't act like a minority in this town. So it's kind of like this double-edged sword, and it really left quite a
sounds
feeling of
confusing too.
very. My identity. I don't think when I joined the military and I met a larger, more diverse group of people, that was the first time I had somebody. I mean, I don't want to give him credit for it now because I know I look like a Puerto Rican Zangief. But I guess when I finally met people that were like, like, why do you like, let's go get your haircut. Let's get you a fade. Let's actually make you like, let's help you feel more comfortable in your skin. Because I didn't really know who I was at all at
Mm,
that point in time.
mm. Yeah, and were you angry at all from having to deal with a dad like that? I mean, did you carry any of that into the military or into sports? I mean, I was pissed just that my parents had a shitty marriage, so I can't
Yeah.
imagine, what that was like.
I was a very angry young Marine, very angry young Marine. So like, I mean, violence of action came easily to me for
Mm,
sure, and I think that serves you well for a certain period of time. Especially, I mean, maybe not if I joined my wife was Air Force, so she's the brains, I was the brawn, right? So like in the Marine Corps, that serves you well because it's just like
mm,
here's your sticks and rocks and go do great things at breaking things down. Um, when I started to get promoted, we mentioned it really briefly in the past, but like I came in pre 9/11. 9/11 happened. I was, meritoriously promoted up to corporal, right? And that was around when 9/11 happened. And then there was this huge void, this absence. A lot of guys that were from sergeants to gunnies, right? Like they were going to be careerists. Now, like, hey, we're going to war now. There was this just absence. They just got out. They left. And so the military had this big vacuum to fill. So the next thing you know, the day that I'm eligible for sergeant, I get promoted to sergeant. And then I went in over to recon, and I'm a recon team leader, and we're going to Fallujah at 2004, 2005 timeframe. And I'm with these kids that they've only been in a year less than I am. And they're like, what are we going to do, Sergeant? I'm like, beats the hell out of me, bro. Like, I have no clue. We're going to figure this out together. I couldn't just be the violent knucklehead. It still pretty much was back then. And anybody that worked for me back then would probably agree. But that's when I started to realize that I had to figure out why I was so angry inside.
Yeah. Well, what drew you to the military?
Wanting to get out of New Jersey, wanting to figure out what I was going to do, not being tired of being told that I'm never going to be anything. I think part of why, today I feel like I'm dressed laxed because I'm, getting to do things from my home office. But, even when I go to work, I'm wearing a button-up shirt and slacks and dressing that way because I think part of it is still me filling in that, you're never going to be anything, kind of like belief, the negative cognition that I have in my head. At the same time, being a therapist, nobody wants to go get therapy from the guy with the t-shirt with ripped sleeves, drinking his gallon of water or sweatbands on because they just came back from the gym.
Someone might think that's the coolest therapist ever.
Yeah. I definitely recognize dressing in the place that you're trying to work with people on. Yeah. But I had senior therapists when I was a student intern, even commenting why do you dress like that? Is that the way you think therapists dress? I'm like, no, I've seen plenty of therapists that don't dress like this. To me, this is professionalism, and this is what's been put in my head. And I was told that I'll never be something professional. So I guess to me, it's still me finally getting to achieve or being something that, and even in the military, wearing that utilities all the time. I remember being, I cannot wait until I am able to do a different job. Go to work in a button-up shirt and a pair of slacks, because I was tired of sweating and hurting and running around in the woods all the time.
Yeah. You mentioned you were told you would never be something professional. Who told you that?
I think it started with my father. We keep going back to that, and as stereotypical or whatever, just how people feel like this is what we always end up talking about in therapy. There's a lot to that. When you have this, Rogers will say you have the two stable consistents that help develop a person's self-worth. Bandura is going to say that you're bound to replicate the patterns of the archetypes established before you. Jung's going to say that you have these characters that help imprint the anima and the animus within all of us. You're not your parents, but they create the space for the development of your anima and your animus, your masculine and your feminine energies. It's when you're a child, before you know anything about economics or social interactions or how the world works, you have these people in your life, and ideally they'll say two stable consistents. I know modern families are a little different, but two stable consistents that before you understand anything, when your brain's just this mushy mass of not knowing anything, they are everything for you. They are commerce, they are stabilization, they are safety and security for you. So when they say things to you before you are smart enough or intelligent enough to realize that's truth or that's lie or that's good or that's bad or that's right or that's wrong, they just aren't. That's why sometimes people have such a hard time with codependent relationships with mothers or fathers or just sick siblings that just why do you let that person in all the time? It's I don't know. It's just for some reason, even though I know I would never be a friend with a person like that, I let them in over and over and over again because before you knew any better, they were just there. Oh, I lost you, Ben.
Okay, you got me. It reminds me of a great saying with a coach I worked with, Daniel Tuttle. He got from something called access consciousness. It was just this great question and tool he uses, and that's, who does this belong to? You know, we have these mindsets that we carry our whole lives that maybe someone else told us. You know, I had a guy today on a live say, like, I'm not allowed to, when I feel vulnerable, I'm afraid of being emasculated if I'm to be vulnerable. And, you know, we got to ask him, like, who does that belong to? Who taught you that thought? Where did we learn that? Because innately when we're born, you know, we're such open, beautiful, loving souls, and we're testing and experimenting and touching and expressing. And, you know, we get taught to shut that down and then channel it somewhere. And it either comes out through disease or violence, right? So, you know, you had these things that you were told and that you still, you know, sometimes you said you deal with today, even around your weight and around, you know, being a professional, but you've clearly been able to show up anyway, and take action anyway. What's made the difference? Like, how do you break through those negative mindsets?
It's good. I mean, and again, you ask great questions, man. Start off by getting you someone nice and uncomfortable. I don't usually get to talk or want to talk about myself so much. It's usually like, well, what are you here for today? You know, like, so get me uncomfortable and ask great questions that go in a bunch of different directions. And so I think I have a very eclectic way of working with people, and it's a amalgamation of humanistic psychology, you know, like Rogers stuff, existential psychology, and then a lot of Jungian stuff as well too. Like what you're talking about, like that whole phenomenological experience, like, you know, because of event A, it made me adopt certain beliefs or change my perspectives on the world, so that when event B came along, that's how I perceived event B. And that's why I reacted to event B as such. Now, when event C came, I'm taking event A and event B, and that's helping me approach event C. You know, like at each one of these times, especially when it's like a significant or traumatic event, it might make me have to completely change the way that I believe, like my personality, my construct, the ego archetype inside of me has to say, like, yeah, we believe this for a long time, but like to avoid rejection, to avoid abandonment, to survive this event. Yeah, just to survive this event. We can no longer be like this. We can no longer believe this, and we have to adopt these beliefs. And that might work for you for these different points and times in your life. But there's a point in time where we have to recognize that we need to go back and reabsorb some of those aspects. I mean, I'm talking about, you know, really shadow work, like the Jungian concept of doing like shadow work. You don't
for people who don't know what shadow work is, how would you define shadow work, Adrian?
Okay. Yeah. No, that's good. So like I'd love to, we can go all day on this. I love some Jungian stuff, right? So like,
I do shadow work with guys all the time, but what I may do may be different from what you call shadow work, but it all comes from the same place, right? So, so what is shadow work?
All right. So when, you know, when things happen, like I just mentioned, when life events take place, and this, you know, ego archetype inside of us has to say, you know, like, I don't like that. That made me feel uncomfortable. Like, you know, we don't want to ever feel that way again. Or, you know, like when we have to adopt new beliefs and new personality traits, the ones that we've relinquished don't go away. They don't die. They don't disappear. Like this is the analogy I use all the time. Like if my son were to walk in right now while we're doing this podcast, and he's like dressed as a dinosaur, he's like, "Look, Daddy, I'm a dinosaur. Roar, roar, roar." And I'm like, "Get out of here, kid. What are you doing? Get out of here." Ben, I'm sorry, dude. My kid thinks he's a freaking dinosaur. Like, get out of here, man. Get out. That could have been the first time or the 25th time that I've like yelled at him in a similar fashion, right? But that kid now walks away, and like we keep on talking, but his perception of that event might be, "Ow, that really hurt me. That made me really upset. That I don't want to ever feel like that again. Why? What can I do to never feel that way again?" And the ego archetype inside of the mind says, nobody cares that you're a dinosaur. Like, nobody wants to hear that imaginative side of you. Nobody wants that. Like, stop being so vocal. Stop being so outspoken. Stop being so energetic. Like, they don't love you for that. If you want to feel loved by your dad, stop acting that way. So like that part of his personality gets sequestered, like cut away, but it doesn't disappear. What happens is it gets pushed to like the subliminal space, or like, you know, some people call it like the kingdom of the unknown. In the kingdom of the unknown, it's able to grow to immeasurable shapes and sizes, you know, and it lives there with all the other things that society and our interactions with other people tell us are not good, you know. Anger, violence, like all these different things get put into the subliminal space, and that kid might now grow up to be docile, gentle, like never causing any kind of a stir whatsoever, right? Where we'll see these shadows like take over, and where we'll see these shadows like kind of like come out and become a problem is, that kid now, he's 21 years old or whatever, 18 years old. He's at a kegger and he's drinking, and the alcohol pretty much like anesthetizes the frontal lobe. It makes it go numb. With the guard asleep, now these shadow aspects of you, these repressed parts of your personality that are always striving for their time in the light, they always want their recognition, come bursting through the surface. So this quiet, docile kid is now like the kid who's tearing his shirt off to a Guns N' Roses song and like trying to like stage dive on top of everybody. You're like fighting everybody he can. You're muted again, brother.
Or the angry guy that's exploding on his, on his family later on his kids.
Absolutely.
Years later.
Yeah, absolutely. Or the girl that's like, quiet and she's so nice, but now she's I'm just funny when I drink, and she's like mean funny. You're like, you're not funny. You're just kind of like, what the? But that's a part of her personality that she's sequestered, and with the learned behaviors going numb, comes bursting onto the surface. So like shadow work is the process of recognizing all of these times and points and moments where we've like, lost part of our personality, or like, sacrificed part of our personality, and going to like realizing, do I still need to believe what I believed then? Back then I might have had to have done this just to survive. But can I now reabsorb that part of myself and bring it on forward? Can that child reconnect with his assertive nature and learn how to incorporate that into today? Because while he had to quiet it to get through childhood, it would benefit him. It's a pool of renewal. It's a source of energy for him to incorporate that into today.
Yeah, I want to talk about this more specifically, and I want to make sure, just for your time, do you have a hard stop at the end of the hour here?
You can push about 10 after.
Okay, all right. I should have asked first. Okay, we're gonna go right in. So, this is really good stuff, because we're already getting into like why these things can come up. And there's a lot of men I talk to who have all of this repressed anger from their childhood, and women too. It's not gender specific, but mostly because I'm working with men. They don't feel safe expressing their anger. They feel sideswiped by it. I mean, you were angry. You felt a great place to like put it in, with military. And how did you transform, before we get into like the solution, how did anger really start to take a toll on you, and how did you transform it so that you could actually start using it and talking about it in a healthy way and helping other people with it?
It's good. I mean, like, how did it? I think there was a big part of me, like, so Bandura, right, the father of like our CBT approach, you're bound to replicate the models of those archetypes that are set before you, unless, of course, you have this like intense cognitive recognition that like what they're doing is wrong, so wrong in some way, shape, or form. I just know I don't want to do that anymore. And it's still not fully done until like, the full-on completion of thought of like, and now this is how I'm going to do it differently. Like there was a part of me that realized that the way my father, treated me, talked to me, acted with me, like I did not agree with that. And I think it was in the process of starting to try to figure out how I wanted to be a better dad, that I realized that he was angry. And he was just like a really angry guy. I also recognized that I had the propensity to potentially be, just as vulnerable to substances as he was as well too. So I always had to keep an eye on that as well. But like really trying to focus on when I felt anger coming up inside of me. I think a big counterpoint was I wanted to make sure that I didn't respond to it the way that he responded to it. I mean, I'm happily married now. My wife and I, we got 3 beautiful kids. But I was married once before, and that did not turn out so well. And I mean, I was not a mental health counselor back then. I was just a young Marine who was like not very smart at certain points in time. And that went really south, very unhealthy. And I think I recognized I married a lot of my dad, I guess you could say. and which isn't rare.
Married
Like a lot
familiar,
of people,
right?
Yeah, married something familiar, but in a way, in this really bizarre type of a way, like, I married my mother, I married my father, I married that parent. You marry the parent, very often that you have the most conflict with, because in some way it's like you realize that person's not healthy, but to justify to ourselves that we're healthy, we want to get that external validation from this person that has so many similarities, but they're different, obviously. But like, there's so many similarities. If this person approves of me, it's verified in my heart and mind that it wasn't me, it was dad. It wasn't me, it was mom or whoever else.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've had to say to my wife many times, "I'm not your mother." Like,
yeah, no, I
we
mean,
have some similarities, but it's like, but I'm not her, But I get why my wife feels like that and why she's attracted me for some of the same reasons. And that was my shadow side. That was the neediness in me, the like insecure, needy guy, And I just used to try to like, I've had to do a lot of work inside of our marriage, and so I just wonder, how you've had, yeah. So anyway, you were talking about so with your father. You've noticed that you kind of married that with your ex-wife.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's like, again, it's not rare at all to try to find. I mean, let me ask you this, Ben. Do you know how to speak Mandarin?
Ni hao.
A
little bit.
Every once in a while, that question totally bites me in the butt. Like one person will be like,
"No,
just go
I'm
off
not
on it."
fluent, barely.
Yeah, and like why not? Well, because we weren't raised to speak it. Like we weren't. Yeah. It wasn't something that we were familiarized with growing up. Even English. Like, do you remember the first word you ever learned? Like, no. I mean, you just absorbed it. It just became a part of you. Very often, even in our relationships, we're going to just find ourselves falling into these patterns with similar types of people because, like you mentioned, we're comfortable with it. Like it's familiar to us. We want approval from something that is somewhat familiar to us, and we have to recognize at times that was very unhealthy for us. Like we didn't need to be a part of that. We had no choice but being a part of that. We don't need to be a part of that now. Like now, we can find something more healthy for us or better for us.
Yeah. So you just started making different choices. You had the awareness that it wasn't healthy. I mean, you must have in order to have chosen differently.
Well, yeah. I mean, there was stuff that stuck out to me even as a kid. Like, I mean, I mentioned playing soccer. I remember one game I scored 3 goals and we ended up like winning by like 1 goal. It was like 5-4 or something like that, right? And I remember riding home in the car and I'm like, all right, here it comes. Gonna finally get that like, good jobs talk. Like, because my dad, I mean, I think the first time he said he was proud of me, I was like, 20, like, I'm going to get that like good job thing. I'm going to get that like, way to go. I was like, so Dad, we won, we won. He's like, yep. But 1 point, we won by 1 point. And I had 3 goals, He's like, yeah, but like, how many did you miss? And in all honesty, that second goal, like you had to fight through like 3 defenders to get it. Like your wingman was totally open. You should have passed it to him. Like you're being such a ball hog. Like, there was so many chances where you guys could have lost that game because of how selfishly you were playing. And I just remember like, like feeling that crushing feeling and knowing that like, I want my kids to know that I'm proud of them, like all the time. I want them to know that I love them all the time. Like, there was a clear recognition of what I mean, and like I said, I'm glad I had the closure and the resolution I had with him before he passed, but there was still like a clear recognition of what I don't want to be as a father that helped kind of like drive the direction of, growth. I was a jacked up teenager. I was a jacked up young man, for a lot of us in those situations, we don't know how to do it right. We just know what we don't want and what's wrong. So we're like feeling our way through adulthood and life in the dark, just trying to figure shit out as we go, like, oh, that didn't work. That was wrong. That one was messed up. And we just keep refining that approach until we get a little bit better.
Yeah. So is there, that's actually, I mean, is exactly what I wanted to ask you about. Is there any advice? I mean, you're father of 3. You have a wife. 4
total. I have 1 from the first marriage too.
Oh my gosh, yeah, 4. Wow. Okay, right. And you have a business, and you're here right now. How do you make it all work? How do you, how do you balance that?
That's a good question too.
And take care of yourself.
And it's one you have to constantly reassess and reevaluate. But like, I mean, what's it for? Like, what are you doing it for? You know, like there's opportunities to go, you know, give all your time and resources away to earn big bucks, right? Like to go after that dollar. But you're never home. You got no time with your kids, you know, like they're growing up without you. Like what, for all of you out there that are like listening to it and like, you're trying to like, you know, gain those extra zeros at the end of your paycheck or whatever it might be, like, why? Is it because you're trying to build like the beautiful home and like give your family the best life possible? Well, you know what? How much would they give for you to just be present with them, like to be able to spend that time with them, to connect with them? Really trying to get. We are so conformed to society that we have been told what the measure of success looks like, and I think it's really unhealthy and like really wrong.
Yeah. I'm so glad you're talking about this, because that's sort of the type of hyper masculinity and hyper productivity I think we've gotten into, and it actually can take us away from the very things we care about, like our relationships and things like that.
100%.
And how do you transform your anger today? I mean, how did you get from that place where you were? We're kind of jumping around a little bit, but you know, I was thinking about like, you're able to really show up now. But like, what happened to that dude, you know, the young guy in the marriage that was just walking blindly, right? That so many people are still doing today, and lost and surprised by this outburst of emotion, and it's affecting their relationships and marriage, like, you know, or just anything that's affecting their self-worth. Like what was the access for you, and what would you say is like, yeah, just what was it for you? How did you start to transform it? How did you develop the awareness? How did you develop self-care and like tenderness and therapy? How did that come about?
Yeah, that's real good. That's real good. Again, like so multi-directional too, right? Like I think the best answer is, I recognize the importance of, and hear me out now, I recognize the importance of my spirituality. And like, and I'll say spirituality is in like, each one of us has our own spirituality. It is our own connection and direction and relationship, your own personal relationship with what you want to call your higher power, that God construct, that thing that helps to organize or design. And it might be mathematics for you, right? Like, but like, I know what it is for me, and it's concrete for me, but like recognizing that, and then also recognizing that, like, you know, my relationship, my spirituality is specifically in tune for me. It's my relationship. You know, you can, there is no one size fits all, or like, you know, one path for all in this game called spirituality either. You know, like even if we go into like the direct conduit of like, you know, Christianity, like God used prophets and poets and warriors. You know, he has one guy to marry a prostitute to show his faithfulness to show how his faithfulness to his people was. And then he asked another one to pick up some stones and fight freaking giants. You know, like everybody is used a little bit differently. Everyone's spirituality and path is going to be a little different. And I think, you know, going through the healing process, recognizing where my traumas were and how I had been reacting to them, realizing that I was trying to fit so many things into this big empty void inside of me, you know, especially after my first marriage, you know, before I got to where I'm at now, like just trying to find anything in this world to make me feel better about myself. And realizing that nothing was doing that. And realizing I'm trying to measure my success based off of an unrealistic standard created by other people, never once actually stopping and asking myself what I want.
Yeah. What kind of therapy did you seek out? How did you find therapy? How did you find help? It sounds like you asked for help, even if it was from your higher power. But how did you get help? How did you turn yourself around?
I didn't originally ask for help. I was ready to go on another deployment, and it was really because of this one master guns who like knew how jacked up I was. And like, I mean, at this point in time, they'd come back and said, you know, you have 4 compressed discs in your neck, 2 are ruptured, pinching off your spinal column. You're like 1 moderate tackle away from being paralyzed. And this is after Adrian's
talking about his 3rd explosion, just for those coming in right now.
Yeah, even further down the road actually than that one. It was like, yeah. But he basically said, like, you know, he said, take a look around, bro. Like you've been hurt at least in some way, shape, or form on every deployment. Like if you go on this one, there's a good chance, just rolling the dice, you're not going to be able to come home and play with your kids again. Like you're a moderate tackle away from paralysis. Your spinal column's almost cut off. He put my packet in to go to Wounded Warrior Regiment. And, once that's approved, the Marine Corps, no one else can touch you. The docs have you for a while. So I wasn't even willing to go at first. I got approved. I went there. Doctors got in my ears for 30 days at least, and got me to understand what I needed to do. MARSOC wasn't happy about it. I got a phone call 30 days later saying hey, your deployment's in 2 months, you ready to go? And I was like, dude, I got surgery lined up next week, and they go, well, we're not getting another master sergeant on our books until you're off our books. So peace, have a good life. Don't forget to turn your shit in, and that's when I got hit with the depression and the abandonment and all that's when I really needed to go to the mental health route. How did I find the right therapist? Through a lot of failure. That's when I started to go to therapy. Or
when were you willing? I mean, how did you know that you needed therapy? When were you willing to ask for that? Or they just sent you there?
It was part of the process as a patient there, right? But I didn't feel like I needed it. And it wasn't until around that time when they said, we're not getting another one in our books until you're off our books. And I truly just felt like a number. They said there's in one of the gyms here on one of the bases, it says service before self, right? Yeah. And I never realized how true that was until that moment. The service doesn't give two shits about you. The big green machine will keep on rolling right over top of you. I gave them my body, my health, the years of my prime, my first marriage, got my relationship with my oldest son because of that. And when I was hurt and I just needed time to heal, SOCOM was hey, you can teach from a wheelchair. But the Marine Corps was we haven't vetted or verified those billets yet. So we can't have you get a job there until we get you, fixed until you go on this deployment, we get all this other stuff. So I ended up going to therapy because I felt that abandonment and that crushing darkness coming over top of me. And when I started to really feel lost, when I lost my profession, I lost my identity because I lost my purpose. I had allowed all three to get intertwined with each other: my purpose, my profession, and my identity. So when they took the uniform away, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know why I was doing what I was. And that's when I started to get help. And it was in the process of working with counselors, at least I was able to hear what they're saying was smart, but I recognized that they didn't understand me, us. My stats might be a little off, been a little while, but 74, 76% of therapists are females, right? Most of them start their career when they're 21 to 24. The average median age of a therapist is around 44 years old. So the majority of people that were sitting in that chair trying to help me had never lived any kind of a life that reflected what I've been through. Most of them have never even sweat a day in their entire life. And they're telling me this is why you're jacked up. And this is how you should feel about the things that they couldn't even actually conceptualize or understand at all. So a lot of missed attempts. Some of them I'd listen to and I'd just come out feeling even worse because they're telling me, you should have a problem with this. You should feel bad about that. I'm that was my job. My job was to hunt men. If I didn't hurt somebody, I would have felt like I wasted all my time. But you're telling me now I should feel bad about that. So it wasn't until I met one therapist who was I have no clue what you're talking about. I don't know what you're feeling. I'm not even going to pretend to. But that thing you were talking about, that acronym you said, what was that again? No, the one before that? Yeah, that one. Whatever you were talking about, you started to sweat really bad and shake. So let's go back to that one again. Yeah. And he just did through observations and just a very systematic approach, helped me see what I was having problems with. And then he kind of gave me some of the tools to I don't know what we're talking about. I just know that that's the thing that's bothering you. So read this, pursue this. And that's what really fueled my heart to want to get into this place to work with people that have actually, lived a life and done shit. So I can try to be the type of therapist to the best of my ability that I wish I had during that season.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for being that for all of us. And I know you've got to go. I just want to ask you two quick questions. One, what advice would you give for people who are feeling lost and they know they could use help, but they're maybe afraid to ask for it or don't feel safe being vulnerable? Guys like you 20 years ago, 10 years ago that are just kind of broken and lost. Like, what's a first step?
Well, I mean, I think we're doing a good job. You're doing a good job just like this, like break the stigma of, like getting help, like our parents' generation and our grandparents' generation, like good luck trying to, I mean, I love when I get one of the older generations to come into the office and realize that like, it's okay to talk about stuff.
Yeah.
There's therapists out there that are doing it. I've met, I mean, on my team, I've hired a couple of therapists out there that are doing it for the same heartfelt reasons that I'm doing it. It's like to give a different reflection into this world, into this game of like mental health care than, just a sterile approach to it. Do your research, find groups, find guys, find programs, find little fraternities that are wanting to discuss these issues. It's okay to sit back and listen for a while. No one is going to tell, just like spirituality, no one's going to tell you what you need to believe. You need to find what you believe. No one's going to tell you what you need to do to fix that part of you that you just like, there's something wrong and broken inside of there. Like you have to pursue it.
That's beautiful. That's
really it, man. In truth. And even for those of you that are out there, like trying to help that uncle or cousin or friend or whoever that's like, they need help. And I know they need help. In reality, no one cares about the answer until they ask the question themselves. It's like to be there and to be as true and genuine as you possibly can so that when they actually ask the question, they know where to look for the answer is probably the best advice I got for, my fellow wounded healers out there that want to help people.
Oh, I think that's beautiful advice. And the last question I have is if you could give one gift to the world today, what would it be?
Dude, come on. That's like a hard one to just pull out of.
What is the first thing that comes to your mind?
The spirit of listening. Like to genuinely, objectively be able to listen to things. Yeah, I guess that might be hard to conceptualize, but for people
go ahead.
Yeah, if we were all able to hear each other with fresh ears and with patience in our heart, instead of through our broken, warped experiences and a timeline right in front of our eyes.
And what do you see us, if we were able to all hear ourselves doing that, what do you see us doing if we were able to actually listen to each other?
Understand and love. Like you don't even have to agree sometimes to understand and love,
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your time and generosity and wisdom and truth, Adrian. It's been such a pleasure and an honor speaking with you.
I've had a great time. I'm looking forward to doing this again with you sometime.
Yeah, me too. And for anyone who's watching or listening later, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to spread the word, download, and share this with someone who could use it. And dudes, let's go get well. Have a beautiful day. Take care, brother.